Hi, welcome to another edition of The Right Has Left. I am your host, Roy Garden, and on this program we talk about everything and anything that's happening in the White House and Republican politics. Sadly, on this particular podcast, our top story, of course, is going to be the assassination that occurred with Charlie Kirk. It's a sad thing, disgusting thing. No matter what we believe in this world today, everyone has a right to express their First Amendment rights. And as one person said long ago, I may not agree with what you say, but I'll stand to my death for your right to say it. And that is true in today's world. We have become more hostile and more violent just because we disagree with people's opinions. Like on this show, I may not agree with everything that the Trump White House does and the Republican Party does, because once Republican myself, I may use this podcast to express my opinions, but there is no place for violence in this world today, and it's extremely sad. Moving on, they have captured the alleged shooter who shot Kirk, and his name is Tyler Robertson, and he has been arrested. And it is understood that his father turned him into the local sheriff's office there. Tyler Robertson has been the alleged shooter. And Tyler, if you want to know a little bit about his background, he is 22 years old, and he was not a student at the university where Kirk was holding one of his events. He was turned in by his father, as I just stated, who recognized his photo, and according to reports, Tyler said he did the shooting. Now, Utah State records show Robertson is registered to vote, but he is not, I repeat, he is not affiliated with any political party, although Trump said this was an action of the radical left. Tyler did not vote in the last two elections. Robertson's parents, who have been married for about 22 years, own a granite countertop business. They are registered Republicans, and he has two younger brothers. Moving on now, let's talk a little bit about Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk is a Trump loyalist that was a conservative activist with the Turning Point USA. Turning Point USA is an American nonprofit organization that advocates for conservative politics on high school, college, and university campuses. It was founded in 2012 by Charlie Kirk and Bill Montgomery. They have affiliate groups including Turning Point Endowment, Turning Point Action, and Faith, and has been described as the fastest growing organization, and according to the Chronicle of Higher Education, is the dynamic force in campus conservatism. They have a huge audience. In fact, like I said, he has Trump's ear. Charlie Kirk is one of the biggest conservative influences in the U.S. today. To call him a firebrand would be somewhat understanding the case. He's a staunch Trump loyalist who built a huge audience through his Turning Point organization, which has a presence of hundreds of college campuses across the country. Kirk and his band of young conservatives fled the zone through social media. That's how they do it, podcasts. And he has a huge ability, of course, to draw crowds, which led him to a key role in Donald Trump's MAGA movement. Turning Point poured money and people into swing elections. He is, like I said, he just is a huge firebrand. He's going to be a huge loss to the Republican Party. It's sad what happened. Like I said, I don't condone it at all, any type of violence. And it's just flat sad what happened. I guess I need to talk a bit about this situation because, we do have commentary here. First and foremost, a tragic, sad situation that this young man did what he did. There's no room for it. There's no room for any kind of violence. When you want to have a discussion with people who may not agree with you, you do it in a civil manner. Charlie Kirk's Turning Point organization is my opinion. When I was with the Republican Party, I belonged to the Young Republicans, which basically did the same thing. We spoke about conservatism to young people, and I think this is kind of like of a more, dynamic outreach branch of what the Young Republican organization did and used to do. And I don't know if the Young Republicans are still around, but I think Kirk took it one notch further. Now, it's no secret that Charlie Kirk's brand of how he talked about things was controversial. He said a lot of things that I myself do not agree with. And for this young man, Tyler Robertson, just, to assassinate him because he didn't agree with them, there's just no room for that. Everybody has their First Amendment rights. And my heart goes out to, the family. And Kirk leaves behind a wife and 2 young children. It's just a tragic, sad situation. But, for Donald Trump, though, he has kind of politicized this event. I personally think he's trying to do a little bit of distraction from the Jeffrey Epstein files on this, the way he has kind of politicized it. Charlie Kirk was a private citizen, and as you well aware of, he ordered the flags to be lowered to half staff. Now, there are a lot of people, including veterans. And again, this is just my personal opinion, but I've talked to a lot of people, and I've talked to a lot of people on social media. And Trump ordering the flags at half staff, he also gave him the, the Medal of Freedom, like he did with, the radio host that recently passed. Again, that's a president's right to do so. But lowering the flags to half staff, that did kind of, there's a lot of people who haven't done that. And here's why. Flag etiquette calls for the flag to be lowered to half staff when a president, a vice president, or a member of the Supreme Court passes. On a state level, I'm going to repeat that, flags are lowered to half staff if they have a state senator that passes or a congressman that passes. Those are really the only times flags are lowered at half staff. It has never been done for a private citizen that I can recall. I'm trying to look back in the 60s when it was lowered for half staff for Martin Luther King. I don't recall when he was assassinated. But there's a lot of people that haven't done so, and then I've seen on social media, you dirty or unfair, blah, 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 the president ordered it, and you, by God, you... Well, again, there are people who, all due respect to this terrible event, as far as lowering the flag to half staff, they're following decorum as it is listed, and a lot of veterans that's how the flag is supposed to be lowered to half staff. Anyway, I know that's being maybe a little bit trivial, but I've had some comments about that on another post that I did, and that's the reason why some people probably are not doing it, because it's not with decorum how you lower the flag to half staff. Now, moving on to another comment about Trump calling this gentleman a radical, Democratic leftist and blah, 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 which he was an independent. As you said, he hadn't voted in anything. Well, let's talk about that just a little bit. So, take a look at this. Now, these are Republicans who, also carried out assassinations or assassination attempts. So it isn't all left-wing radical, Democrats that have, gone after people. And this young man was an independent. So I just wanted you to see that, because I'm trying to clear the air here a little bit. I understand the hard feelings, and this was a terrible, terrible event that happened. But we also need to use critical thinking skills when we talk about this. And as you can see, the man who tried to kidnap Nancy Pelosi and assault her husband was a Trump supporter. The man who targeted and killed the son of Obama-appointed district judge, Esther Salas, was a Trump supporter. The man who wanted to hang Mike Pence on January 6th were Trump supporters. The man who targeted the home of Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro was a Trump supporter. So, it goes on and on and on. So, please, when you see this kind of stuff, use some critical thinking skills. And I know this is just terrible stuff, and I'm going to move on. But again, my heart goes out to the family, and I'm sure due justice is going to be brought to this young man. He did a very tragic, stupid, evil thing, and he deserves everything that he's going to get. Sadly, so please, use civil tongue. And if you don't agree with somebody, and have a serious critical thinking skills discussion. Violence, there's no place in this world for that. And I know a lot of people, sometimes you got to use violence to get your point across, because all people understand. This is not the world we live in, folks. It is right now, obviously, but let's, by God's grace, try to change it. Okay? All right, let's move on. So there's another story that came up that is quite interesting, and that is the United States Navy SEALs Team 6. There's stuff going on here, but I have to take a little moment here and find out what I want to find out. But here, let's talk about this for just a second and change the subject matter. United States SEAL Team 6 shot and killed several North Korean civilians during a botched mission in 2019 to plant a listening device in a nuclear-armed country of North Korea, reportedly approved by U.S. President Donald Trump. A leading U.S. news outlet reports. The New York Times, and I know Trump does not like the New York Times, but so be it. They reported this past Friday that the classified mission was carried out by the United States SEAL Team 6 during high-stakes diplomatic negotiations between Washington and Pyongyang in early 2019, Trump's presidency. What happened here is they got out there and was trying to put these listening devices out. And when they were doing that, in the dead of night with blackout communication, a series of errors led to civilians, several North Koreans reportedly diving for shellfish, inadvertently came across the United States Special Forces as they splashed ashore. The SEALs teams opened fire, killing all of those on board on a small fishing vessel. This is what the Times is reporting, without specifying the number of casualties. Officials familiar with the mission told the Times that the U.S. soldiers pulled the bodies into the water to hide them from the North Korean authorities. One source described how SEAL members punctured the boat crew's lungs with knives to make sure that their bodies would sink. The Times reported it gained knowledge of the botched mission through interviews with dozens of people, including civilian government officials, members of the first Trump administration, and current and former military personnel with knowledge of the mission also talked about this. So, and of course, Donald Trump says, I don't know anything about that. Well, that never happened. News to me. Of course, he's going to deny it. This is a terrible thing. It's SEALs Team 6 is a very, very high-polished group of men and military unit. And in the dark of night, when they saw that, they didn't want to be discovered. They're going to do what they have to do. So, it's a terrible thing. But what are you going to do with stuff like that? Dear God! But it's sad. It really is. Moving on. So President Donald Trump also debuted his new White House patio to Washington insiders, also known as the Road Guard Club, and liberals are having a meltdown over it. The Republican, Donald Trump, who's now 79, hosted a dinner on the newly paved patio on Friday evening, inviting only key senators, members of Congress, and people that can bring peace and success to him. So, he's pretty happy about that. So, when Donald Trump does something, people love it. So, he took the Rose Gardens, what he did, and he basically paved it over. Now, he said the roses were protected, which I'm sure they probably were, but these people that he invited, of course, are all the people that basically do whatever he says. When he says jump, they all say how high, and they vote strictly along party lines for the Republican Party. They don't even discuss anything. If he wants something done, they pass it and sign it on to legislation for him. And of course, as he stated, they can bring peace and success to our country. That's why they invited these key people. The president said to his guests, the menu for the elite evening revealed that members got to choose from a great, beautiful dinner, as you can see here. The menu for the elite evening revealed that they got to choose from garden salad, New York strip steak, thyme roasted chicken, some pasta previa, and a fudge-filled 7-layer cake for dessert. And Trump rationalized agreeing to granite swap as a practical saying. Well-heeled women were going crazy, sinking to the lawn on very wet days. Neither the garden beds nor hundreds of roses were impacted by the project, so he says. It was funded by the Trust for the National Mall and private donors, according to Trust spokesperson, so your tax dollars did not pay for this, and it's designed to make the garden more event-friendly. The big picture, the decorator-in-chief is making his mark on the people's house, including a newly announced $200 million ballroom. So Trump's not done renovating the White House. And he's not the first president to do so. Let's be transparent here, or face backlash for his design choices. They attacked Theodore Roosevelt for clearing the plant-growing houses to create the West Wing, according to the White House Historical Association, a bipartisan entity which was established by Jackie Kennedy. Meanwhile, former President Truman's pricey, now iconic balcony was criticized for its frivolous in a post-war economy. It was also not the first Trump-era rose garden pruning either. First Lady Melania Trump unveiled a muted version, sans crabapple trees, in their first term. What they're saying is the south portico, the north portico, and the east wing, the west wing, and the Trump balcony all raised concerns at the time. And we have a clip here about President Trump when he was inaugurating this beautiful patio area. Watch this.
I'll tell you what we did. The grass was not usable. Every time we'd have a press conference, women in particular were sinking deep into the mud. And at some point I said, it's time to make the change. We picked a great stone, and we have a great speaker system, I hope. I hope everybody hears us perfectly. But a lot of people are wondering why you're here tonight. And I'll tell you very simply why you're here, because you are the ones that I never had to call at 4 o'clock in the morning. You are the ones that have been my friend. And you know what I'm talking about. And you're smart and even brilliant people, but you would tell people, I don't speak to the president much because I always vote with the president. And Mike Johnson, who's going to go down as one of the great speakers of our time, or any other time. Mike, thank you very much. I said, Mike, I want to do something. I want to reward the people that have confidence in their president, have confidence in you, and vote for us. And that includes some of the senators that are here. We have senators, we have congressmen. This was originally going to be for Congress only. We're going to have the senators sometime, but a couple of the senators really wanted to be here. And I'm going to start off by one of them, who's a really good friend of mine, comes from a state where I was, I think, 77 out of 77 district or areas. I won them all 3 times. Ronald Reagan was second. He got 56. Is that right? I got 77 out of 77, and I did it 3 times. So I happen to love the state of Oklahoma.
So it's, they've got everything on here. They got yellow and white strip umbrellas from Trump's Mar-a-Lago area. He ruffled some feathers by paving over what was previously green space, as I mentioned. And so you've got a lot of stuff going on there that it's making some people upset. But, the people that did come to that thing, like I said, they're all just basically very loyal Trump supporters. And it just goes on and on and on. So anyway, a judge on Tuesday night blocked President Donald Trump from firing Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook. A lawsuit challenging her removal does continue. So Lisa's still got her job. The Public Interest Federal Reserve Independence weighs in favor of Cook's reinstatement. So says, Lisa Giacab. Lisa Giacab wrote in granting Cook a preliminary injunction barring her from termination. Cobb said that Cook has made a strong showing that her purported removal was done in violation of the Federal Reserve Act's for cause provision. Cobb wrote that the best reading of that provision is that legal cause for removing a federal governor on the board is limited to actions related to their behavior in office, for a cause that does not contemplate removing an individual purely for conduct that occurred before they began in office, Cobb wrote. The judge was referring to allegations of mortgage fraud by Cook that Trump cited for firing her. Now, Cook, who denies any wrongdoing, is the first black female federal governor. So that's what that was all about. News broke late Monday afternoon that members of the House Oversight Committee have received a batch of files from the estate of Jeffrey Epstein. Now, we're all fully aware of that. Epstein. What's going on here is with those files, as you're well aware of, there's a book out, and that book is called The Birthday Book. And within that birthday book, there is some pictures that have been coming out, and some of those pictures are kind of, as you know, drawing some attention. Now, when they received these batch of files from the estate of Epstein, as you're aware, he died in federal custody in 2019 almost immediately. The Wall Street Journal and Democrats on committee revealed that the batch contained the original copy of the so-called birthday book, which was compiled by Maxwell for her then-boyfriend's 50th birthday celebration, including a body letter that supposedly pinned Epstein by Trump. And that's what's interesting about all of this. And as you can see here, that's Trump's signature. Now, everybody's saying it's authentic. You've got a lot of Trump supporters that say it's not authentic, and Trump himself said that's not my signature. But the two reminiscence about a wonderful secret that they supposedly had shared. It was first reported by the Wall Street Journal in July, prompting a furious denial by the White House. And, of course, what Trump sued for $10 billion with a B against the paper, its journalist and owner, Rupert Murdoch, who happens to own Fox News. Originally, the White House claimed that the letter was fake and non-existent. Yeah, they actually said that at one time. But on Monday, the White House explanation remained firm. Now, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt and others members of the Trump team declared that the signature on the letter was a forgery, though it bears an impeccable resemblance to other signatures verifiable made by the president over the years, including during his time in the White House. So, what are you going to do? But the story continues. Now, a new investigation reveals how Jeffrey Epstein worked with J.P. Morgan Chase while carrying out his sex trafficking operations. J.P. Morgan Chase, one of the world's top banks, worked with Epstein from the late 1990s until 2013, even as employees raised concerns about him, according to a new report, also by the New York Times. Epstein died by suicide, as we know, in his jail. So Chase processed more than 4,700 transactions for Epstein, which totaled more than $1.1 billion with a B, and included payments to his victims, the Times reports. Now, it wasn't until 2019 that J.P. Morgan opened a internal investigation called Project Jeep and filed a report with the federal regulators, retroactively flagging these transactions as suspicious, according to the outlet. Now, Epstein was also regularly withdrawing tens of thousands of dollars in cash nearly every month, which have set off internal alarms, the Times reports. The bank also set up accounts for women who turned out to be Epstein's victims, according to the Times. J.P. Morgan spokesperson Joseph Evangelisti told the Times that the bank's relationship with Epstein was a mistake, and in hindsight, we regret it, but we did not help him commit heinous crimes. So, J.P. Morgan Chase is a huge bank, and so all the stuff with the Epstein files continues, including that drawing with Trump's signature, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens with all this stuff. But it just goes on and on and on and on and on, doesn't it? Yeah. Also, the news that's going on is President Donald Trump's rare outing at a local restaurant Tuesday night, this past Tuesday, got off to a rocky start when he came face to face with some protesters. Watch this clip.
Free Palestine! Free DC! Free Palestine! Trump is the Hitler of our time! Free DC! Free Palestine! Trump is the Hitler of our time! Free DC! Free Palestine! Trump is the Hitler of our time! Free DC! Free Palestine! Trump is the Hitler of our time!
Let's go. Time to go.
Trump is the Hitler of our time! Free DC! Free Palestine! You should all be ashamed that he was welcomed here! He's terrorizing communities in DC!
Time to go.
He's terrorizing communities all over the world! From Puerto Rico to the Philippines! From Palestine to Venezuela! He is terrorizing communities! He is not welcome to DC! He's not welcome to Palestine! Palestine is not for sale! Free DC! Free Palestine!
Now, Trump was accompanied by Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and other administration officials. They all arrived by motorcade at Joe's Seafood, Prime Steak and Stone Crab, less than a quarter mile away from the White House. Trump briefly spoke to reporters on the street outside the restaurant, where he was met with cheers and some chants of Free Palestine, of course. And once he was inside, as he was greeted restaurant patrons, a group of protesters holding Palestinian flags began chanting Free DC, Free Palestine. And Trump is a Hitler of our time. The activist group Code Pink claimed credit for the protests. They have a way of getting into things and, blending in with the crowd, and then they break out these protests. Now, as the videos you just seen there on his social media accounts, Trump is seen approaching the protesters before he stands in front of them, and then he smiles. He then gestures for them to leave, and they are escorted out of the restaurant as a protester says he's terrorizing communities in D.C., and the Secret Service got them out of there. Of course, a lot of these people that you saw there were literally embarrassed because they're like, why isn't the Secret Service doing their job? What happened there? And Trump just kind of smiled and went, okay. I don't know why these people were there. And so that's the main thing is, how did they get in there? Why didn't the Secret Service, screen the area before the president arrived and create this embarrassment? But, as far as I'm concerned, good for Code Pink for getting in there, because sometimes that's what you got to do. Again, this was a peaceful protest, no violence, but they have the right on their First Amendment right to protest no matter who's in there. So good for them. Let's move on. Chief Justice John Roberts is in the news. On Tuesday, he temporarily kept in place the Trump administration's decision to freeze nearly $5 billion for foreign aid. Roberts acted in the administration's emergency appeal to the Supreme Court in case involving billions of dollars in congressional-approved aid. Again, Congress approved all this money. President Donald Trump said last month that he would not spend the money, invoking disputed authority that was last used by another individual president. Basically 50 years ago is when this was last used, that he could, when you don't spend the money that Congress approves. So it's been that long. U.S. District Judge ruled that the Congressional would have to approve the decision to withhold the funding. Trump told House Speaker Mike Johnson in a letter on August 28th that he would not spend that $4.5 billion in congressionally approved foreign aid, effectively cutting the budget without going through the legislative branch. He used what was known as what's called the pocket rescission, as I was just mentioning to you. And that's when a president submits a request to Congress towards the end of a current budget year to not spend the approved money. The late notice means Congress cannot act on the request in the required 45-day window, and the money does go unspent. So we as a country have always been able to provide foreign aid to people like third world countries that do not have the resources like we do. That's part of what made our country great, is being able to help others. And of course, Trump believes in, us and nobody else. We'll take care of our own, which we're not even doing that anymore with the cutting of, food stamps and resources and HUD and Title 19. We're not taking care of our own, but what he's doing with this money, he's taking all these resources and just putting it into ICE and everything else so he can clean house with the people that he feels doesn't belong here. And we're going back to this corporate example again. Work. If you can't work, that's too dang bad. If you're a senior, go out to the North 40 and slowly pass away. You're not worth anything to us. We want you to work for the rich, and if you can't do that, then you're no use to us. White privilege. So, he doesn't want to help any of these other countries either. So, off you go. Interesting to see what happens. Also in the news today, Kamala Harris. Yes, she has a new book out, and Kamala Harris says it was reckless to let Biden make re-election decisions on his own. In retrospect, Kamala Harris writes on letting Joe and Jill Biden decide on their own whether the then president should have tried to run for re-election. I think it was reckless. This is the assessment that the former vice president does make in her new book, and it is called 107 Days. And she says in the memoir of her abbreviated 2024 run, in a significant break from the dual stance she took towards her old boss throughout their time in office, and since it's Joe and Jill's decision, we all said that like a mantra is if we'd had all been hypnotized. Harris writes in the first expert of 107 Days. Now, this book just came out this past Wednesday, and she is making the book tours now. And The Atlantic had a little brief preview of that book. She goes on to say the stakes were simply too high. This wasn't a choice that should have been left to an individual's ego, an individual's ambition. It should have been more than a personal decision. Part of the problem, Harris writes, was a Biden team so committed to not helping her that she says it ultimately came down at his own and the country's expense. When polls indicated that was getting more popular, the people around him didn't like the contrast that was emerging, Harris writes. None of them grasped that if I did well, he did well. That, given the concerns about his age, my visible success, and his vice president, was vital. It would serve as a testament to his judgment in choosing me and reassurance that if something happened, the country was in good hands. My success was important for him. His team, Harris ends the chapter by writing, didn't get it. So there you go. That's what that was all about. Either way, Harris lost. We all know that. But it's kind of interesting that some of the stuff now comes out and the dust has settled, and she's starting to talk about a little bit about how she personally feels, and of course that's going to sell books. Now, whether Harris is going to run in 2028, we still don't know. There's a good chance that she will, and also the governor of California is also becoming extremely popular. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens and see if Harris is going to throw her hat in the ring. Let's move on to Florida news as we wrap up this edition of The Right Has Left. The Florida Department of Education sent a letter to state educators Thursday warning them that if they will be held accountable for any despicable comments made online regarding Charlie Kirk's death. And yes, that did come out. And here's a copy of that letter that was made to Florida educators. And Florida Commissioner of Education, Asistius Camaras, I probably butchered that person's name. If I did, excuse me, wrote in a letter dated Thursday, September 11th, that some social media post of the nature has been brought to his attention. Though he said the posts were not a reflection of the vast majority of Florida's educators. Nevertheless, I will be conducting an investigation of every educator who engages in this vile, sanctionable behavior, his letter stated. Multiple people have come under scrutiny for comments made after the shooting, including Matthew Dowd, a political operative and contributor to MSNBC who was fired by the network. There's grief, rage, anger, and disagreements boiling over on social media. People have become very emotional about it, and as social media does tend to encourage people to do so, their filters come off at some point, said First Amendment attorney Allison Steele. But that's what the First Amendment protects, is that marketplace of ideas. So, My comments about this. I agree that teachers need to keep their traps shut while in school and on school property and on any district property. But what teachers and educators do when they're away from school, on their own personal time, on their own social media platforms, it is their First Amendment right to express their opinion, whether Ron DeSantis or anybody else agrees or not disagrees. Trying to tell people how to think, walk, chat, steal, not steal, but when they're 24/7 as a teacher, and that's just wrong. I mean, they've already stripped them from the rights about diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI. They can't do that anymore. They're already telling them what they can teach and not teach as far as books, Martin Luther King and all that. They're taking that away from teachers. They all want them to become white privileged instructors and teach kids about everything except, don't talk about anything that is not dealing with white privilege. So now they're trying to tell them, don't express your opinion about this situation. Now, I agree, a person was killed here, and I understand that. They were assassinated. Terrible, terrible thing. But if they happen to mention that they didn't agree with Charlie Kirk's activism, and express that way, they wanted him to shut their trap. But again, if this had been a Democratic activist that was assassinated, that would probably be a whole different story. Tell the whole world about what you think about that person, That's okay. But, this was a Republican activist. Keep him, don't say anything, this. So it's do as I do, not as I say. And it's sad that there has to come to this. So, I've talked to some educators here in Indian River County where I do this podcast, and they have their opinions, but they're afraid of losing their job now. They're not going to say anything. So it's wrong. I understand not saying anything in the classroom and saying anything in front of your students. I get that, but when they're off the clock and they have a social media post and they're talking to their friends or somebody that may have a different opinion, and they press their opinion, to silence them and say you can't do that, that's wrong. That's their First Amendment rights to do so. And this guy, again, is just, a lot of these people are turning this thing into a political Republican conservative circus and not respecting, what happened here. They're starting to use politics again to bolster themselves off to create more MAGA support. And they're the ones, that's what's wrong there. So it's just freaking sad with how this all comes down here. So anyway, my last story is going to deal with this gentleman, and we'll wrap it up. Former Republican North Carolina Congressman Madison Cawthorn, that's what this picture you're looking at here, was arrested Wednesday on an out-of-county warrant for failing to show up in court. Now, Cawthorn was scheduled to appear in court for an arraignment in Collier County. He was cited by Naples police for driving without a valid driver's license on August 19th, according to Collier County Clerk of Courts. A warrant was issued Wednesday morning after Cawthorn failed to show up for the arraignment scheduled for 8:30 a.m. Cawthorn has been living in Cape Coral, Florida, and he was released on a $2,000 bond, according to the Lee County Sheriff's Office. A statement was shared with Gulf Coast News from Cawthorn that former Congressman Madison Cawthorn was arrested earlier today for failure to appear. So there was a news story about this. This gentleman is, he was a former congressman in, as I mentioned, another state. He was going to run again here in Florida. He says, well, it was a misunderstanding. That's why I didn't appear in court. I screwed up. I'm sorry. And once he was processed, of course, he was immediately released. According to Cawthorn, police knocked on his door and arrested him at his home after losing his election in 2022 in North Carolina. Cawthorn has been rumored to be running for Congress in Florida's District 19. Previously, Cawthorn was involved in a crash along Alligator Alley in Collier County in 2024, where the report stated he slammed into the back of a Florida State Trooper vehicle. So, whether this guy's political career is in jeopardy or where he's going to continue to run, we'll just have to wait and see. Anyway, that's my edition of this podcast. The Right Has Left. I'm Roy Garden, your host. This has been a terrible, sad week. I pray, I so hard pray that we can do better than this as human beings on this planet. You know, the violence has got to stop, no matter which party that you support. And I pray that it does. Until then, you try to have a good week. Take care.